Right, we start off by asking and needing to answer 5 simple questions. Who are we? Why are we here? Where are we? Where are we going? And how are we going to get there? Those are the 5 simple strategy questions. So this is Geoffrey Moore, who worked for and in a company called Regis McKenna, a strategic marketing company. He then founded the Chasm group out of research work, abstracted out of working with clients that came out of the company Regis McKenna. We need to agree the answers to those 5 questions. We need a model of some kind that describes what is going on, common language so that we can communicate effectively and make decisions. And this is the common language that comes out of the Chasm stuff. It turns out that Geoffrey Moore, as I understand it, was actually a professor of English language or literature, I'm not sure which. So he's very good at using metaphors, and these are metaphors, which we won't have time to get into. Specifically, this adoption curve, although it builds on the work of Everett Rogers, which builds on the work of Geoffrey Moore, I think that's how you pronounce his name, the person who actually did the fundamental research that Everett Rogers built on. A discontinuous innovation is not like the stuff that Everett Rogers did, which was continuous innovation. It's innovation. Discontinuous is one where the customer or the adopter, take the word customer out and use the adopter must change the behavior to get the real benefit. They can't just carry on as they are and use this new innovation. This is what Everett Rogers put forward. You have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, or something along those lines. And what Everett Rogers figured out by studying actually the work of Geoffrey Moore, I still don't know how to pronounce that name, was when American farmers adopted new technology at the end of the Second World War, the early innovators, the people who would take experiments with new technologies and things, the early adopters listened to what the innovators said, and they started to adopt the same technology. The early majority, with a larger chunk of the environment or marketplace, could be referenced by the early adopters, and then they would start to adopt. And the late majority would see what the early majority did, and then they would adopt, and the laggards would say, well, eventually they'll buy it when it's cheap. What Moore said was, actually, with discontinuous innovation, it ain't like that. There are fundamental gaps between each of these segments, and there's a big gap, which is this thing called the chasm. He called it chasm. The reason being that to the left of the chasm, the adoption motive is personal, based either on a keenness to be first in a field to adopt a new innovation, or by having a vision that you think this innovation will help you deliver your vision faster than anybody else. Once you get across the chasm, it's not like that. The buying or adoption decisions are very pragmatic across the chasm, and they will not listen to the visionaries. They just say, yeah, that's all fine. For everything you've done that's visionary and it's worked, I'll show you 10 things that you tried that failed. What Moore figured out, was that there are actually different propositions. He uses the notion of a snowflake in the early adopters, in that snowflakes have 6ness about them. They're all the same. They all have 6 leaves or petals or strands, whatever you're going to call them, branches. But they're all actually unique. But what happens with snowflakes is the snow starts to forms snow drifts, and you can start to see where the innovation is actually being adopted. And the reason that people adopt the innovation early is to get ahead. When you're getting across the chasm, it's not the same. And in the bowling alley approach, I'll go into the bowling alley approach, what Moore is saying is, once you get across the chasm, it's a pragmatic buying decision. If you've got a broken mission critical process that you cannot deliver using all of the processes, means, resources that you've got, then grudgingly, you will accept a new innovation. But there's a pressure is to say, my mission critical process is broken, I can't fix it. If you've got something, I'll adopt it from you. What happens after that is that once the early majority starts seeing that some of their colleagues in the early majority are adopting this new innovation, they will actually cross-reference the people who are like themselves. People listen to people like themselves is the notion. And the early majority, if they see early majority colleagues adopting it, they'll start to adopt it. You then get a diffusion effect, and the tornado takes off, and it's crazy. Everything goes crazy, trying to adopt this new innovation as fast as possible. It then stabilizes, and you get to what's referred to as Main Street, where Main Street is actually, okay, this is now the way we do things around here. The objective of a discontinuous innovation approach is to actually become part of the infrastructure of the way things are done. The other thing to point out is this is not about a particular innovation. if you're talking product technology, product innovations, it's not about a specific product, it's about a category. This is category dynamics, not single innovation dynamics. So you've got to study the category and figure out what the category is that you're actually looking at. Finally, on Main Street, you wait until it's safe to actually adopt it. The world has proven it's safe. Okay, now I'll go for it. Okay. I cannot go through all of this slide, but basically these are, it's an analysis, a categorization of what is the buy-in pressure to actually adopt. So what's the adoption pressure? What's the reference group that you look for before you adopt it? How much are you prepared to pay for this innovation? Does the provider of the innovation need to be a leader? What's the messages that come out with this? And what's the services content? These shift as you go through the curve. They shift dramatically. They actually become very different as you go through. The point that Moore makes is, if you take the orange vertical stripe here of the early adopters, if you try to do the same approach with the early majority, it will fail. This is now different strategies. This is the kind of strategy that you would look for if you're trying to get the early majority, the very early marketplace, or the very early adopters to adopt. The stuff above, the stuff that's in blue is about the adopters. The stuff that's in orange down at the bottom is about your organization. What kind of organization do you need to be successful in the early market? If you're in the bowling alley, I'm going to come to the bowling alley, it changes. I cannot go through, it will take me 20 minutes to go through how these profiles differ from each other, but they are very different. Tornado, Main Street. These are the different strategies that you adopt. You normally look to adopt in the different segments of the marketplace. So that's the sort of stuff that in a rattle through very fast is the overall proposition. Now, behind it, strategic priority. Behind it are some other models that Moore put together. He actually put together 4 different models. The bowling alley strategy it almost came out in the call this afternoon with Jasper. Almost came out in the call this afternoon.
So just to emphasize, the bowling alley strategy is around early majority. So there's the other side of the chasm. This
is how you get across the chasm. This is where you are now trying to get the pragmatic adopters who grudgingly will only move if you can actually fix a broken mission critical process, is how you go about it. Peter Jones uses the term requisite variety. This is about requisite variety. What it's saying is, if you have an innovation that you want the world to adopt, you don't have enough variety to be able to amplify it enough for the entire world to adopt your innovation. Not only that, the early majority simply won't do it. So what you look for is not a segment that is big enough, but one that is small enough. You're looking for a very tightly focused group of people who nevertheless are in the pragmatic early majority that have a broken mission critical process, and you work towards that, very clearly defined. And you start out with this thing called application 1, segment 1. So you're going to apply your innovation in a very tightly defined segment and become known in that segment in a way that what you get known for is delivering what you say you can deliver with your innovation, be it and in our case, it's transformation. Oh, look, these folks have actually done it in our kind of environment. I might look at that and I will now start to adopt it.
So that's the classic example is around solar panels, and when solar panels reach a price that it makes business sense, and
yes.
So they will take it on.
You've got solar technology. So what you do is you start out with application 1, but you deliver it into different segments. So you're not trying to go to application 2 in a different segment. You're staying in the same application area but changing the segment. So you reference from segment to segment, or you can reference the other way and you stay in the same segment, but you deliver other innovations into that segment. Then what you can do is do that jump where you can really start to proliferate what you're doing. So you have the notion of going up by what's referred to here in this commercial environment for this model of customer reference. And up this way, it's to do with whole product. You're building your whole product, because what you're actually doing is building new applications in this segment, and you're starting to expand in the segment rather than taking your application to different segments. It's a bowling alley strategy. There's a map for how you actually go about implementing the strategy and sequence events, identifying the lead pin, focus on success in that lead pin, migrate to new segments, migrate to new applications, and migrate to new applications, new segments. Here is how you go about choosing a lead pin. You've got to have a compelling reason to buy or a compelling reason to adopt. What's the compelling reason why I have to do this right now? Why am I compelled to do this and change the priority of what I am doing to actually adopt this innovation? Is there a gorilla present? A gorilla being, where does an 800-pound gorilla sleep? Wherever it wants to. So if there's a gorilla present who's doing the same type of thing you're doing in the same kind of place you want to enter, well, basically forget it. If there's one present, be very careful. Are the people you're approaching a self-referencing group? This notion of a self-referencing group is really, really important. They go meet each other at conferences. They read the same press. They share the same media. Or do they reference each other? Because they will trust each other far more than they will trust somebody coming in from the nominally outside. Can we reach them? Are they reachable? We just don't have the reach, which might not necessarily be physical reach or geographical reach. It could be resource reaches. Can we deliver a whole product? I'll talk about the whole product in a minute. Have we got the right partners? And can we migrate? So that's how you choose your lead pin. It's a bowling alley. This is
just a minute. Can we go back for a moment?
Yeah.
So again, I think this is anticipating what you're going to do, but just to follow on with the transformation of the energy system.
Yeah.
So that's the lead pin. People want to transform the energy system. So app one is solar energy panels. Yes. And they understand, going up the left-hand side, the customer reference, other places that can use solar panels. Yeah. So they get many applications of solar panels. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is that if you're working specifically on sustainable energy, that's not going to get you through with the cars, for example, or transportation. Yeah. You've got to do something different. You've either got to get plug-in cars, or you've got to change the way that they are being powered. So that leads you to a different application.
Yes.
So you're doing the whole product referencing.
Yes. Now, two things. Geoffrey Moore refers to this categorically as the technology adoption lifecycle. The word technology immediately, we're about products and computers and software and what have you. Technology, the best description I know of technology is the formalization of a craft. That's what a technology is. It's the formalization of a craft. So the craft of transformation, if you formalize it to the point where you can actually replicate it and transmit it, for me, that's a technology. You can think of it in that way. So I think of it more of innovations stroke technologies as being very similar. Okay? So this works with the consultancy practice, for instance, a consultancy methodology, a theory of change. Think of it as a theory of change being the technology stroke innovation that you're actually encouraging the world to adopt.